everyone, it's been a long time in the making, but I finally got a chance to make some Cubanos with homemade Cuban bread, and boy, let me tell you, despite knowing some improvements I can make in the future, I was shook how good this sandwich came out to be, so let's get started. Alright, so I got 2 pork shoulders bone in, which is around 10 pounds total. I'm gonna have to attempt to debone it. Since I normally don't butcher anything, I do a pretty bad job. It's no issue since we're gonna braise the pork shoulder anyway. I cut off the skin and attempt to debone to the best of my abilities. Good thing about having the bone and the skin is that you can always save this later in a Ziploc bag and store it in your freezer to make some ramen stock. Although you can definitely just make this easier for yourself and just buy the boneless pork shoulder. Once you finish deboning, cut your pork shoulders into cubes around 1 inch. Once you cut them all up, weigh it on a scale and add 1.25% of salt of total weight of the pork. I'll also be adding in some cumin or oregano as well, and this is just eyeballed. I would say it's around 3 tablespoons each. I'll give everything a good mix before I start using my garlic mincer to mince up a bunch of garlic. I think I used something around 12 garlic cloves, and I'm a garlic lover, so I use a whole bunch since I had a lot of peeled garlic left over from a previous party. To this, I'm going to zest up 2 limes and add in the juice from 4 limes along with half a cup of orange juice. Give everything a good mix, and I let this sit in my fridge for 5 to 6 hours because I was busy until nighttime. I've seen videos where people say marinate it overnight or you don't need to marinate it, but I just chose what works best for my schedule. In the end, as home cooks, it'll be tasty enough for a vast majority of people, so choose what works best for you and your schedule. Fast forward in time, I preheated my oven to 300 degrees Fahrenheit and I have my marinated pork shoulder out of the fridge. All I'm going to do is just dump it in my Dutch oven, put in 2 bay leaves, and stick it in the oven for around 2 to 3 hours. While the pork is in the oven, we can start prepping our Cuban bread. I doubled the recipe from chainbaker, but I decided to do a cold proof compared to its pre-ferment version. This is a bowl of 310 grams of water. I'm going to add 5 grams of yeast and 50 grams of leftover lard I had from my cooked bacon. I'll add in 500 grams of bread flour, 10 grams of salt, and 20 grams of sugar. Give everything a good mix before I use my stand mixer and let it knead for around 6 to 7 minutes, I would say. The dough should be stretchy and elastic. Form this into a ball and we're going to let this rest in the fridge for 30 minutes. This is going to let the gluten relax so then we can fold our dough ball later. 30 minutes later, dust the top of the dough with some flour and flip it flour side down. We're going to fold it over the middle and then rotating slightly each time until you fold it all around. Hey, if you guys been enjoying this video so far, leave a like and subscribe for more cooking content. I'll be making more down the line. Now we want to flip it again and start pressing it down with both hands touching the table surface and pulling it towards you to create some tension. Your ball should be nice and smooth by the time you put it back in the bowl. We're going to let this slowly ferment in the fridge overnight while we wait for the pork to finish. After 2 hours, I took out my Dutch oven to see if the pork was finished. To do so, I'm going to poke a fork through it, and there was some resistance going through the pork, so I decided to put it back in my oven for another 30 minutes. When I give time measurements, it's more of an estimate. It's still up to the cook to decide whether or not their meat is done, as everyone's preference is different. When the pork is finally tender enough, I'm going to let it cool down in a separate bowl as my Dutch oven couldn't fit in my fridge at the time I filmed this. Once all the pork is inside the bowl, I'm going to shred it a bit before I pour in some of the liquid. Try to pour in the liquid until most of the pork is covered because you don't need that much, and later on when we cook it again later, when we put it on the sandwich, it's going to get a little too wet. When it's finally cooled down, I'm going to let it chill in the fridge overnight as I wanted to use the pork when I finish baking my bread the next day. Next day has arrived and here I have my cold proof dough. I'm going to sprinkle the top with some flour, put it down flour side, and separate the dough. We're now going to pre-shape our dough as well. Start by taking the right side, fold it towards the middle, and repeat with the left. Now we're going to take the top and slowly roll it downwards while tucking it until you form a log. After we pre-shape both halves, cover with some plastic wrap and let this rest for 15 minutes as the gluten will need to relax before we can shape our Cuban loaves. After letting the dough rest, dust the top with flour and flip it over. Now we want to flatten this dough and stretch it out into a rectangle, I would say around 15 inches by 8. It should be a little less shorter than a half sheet pan, and that should be good enough. I use a small little rolling pin, and that helps out a little as well. If anytime the dough starts resisting, it stretches back, let it rest for another 15 minutes so you don't tear the dough. At this point, I think the dough is good enough, so I'm going to start rolling it from the bottom to the top slowly while tucking it down each time until I form a log. Take your time, there's no rush. When you're near the top, fold it over itself and seal the seam. Flip it over seam side down on some parchment paper and flatten it out. Cover it with some plastic wrap and let this proof for, I would say, 1.5 to 2 hours. And during the last 30 minutes, preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. When it is ready, the dough should be nice and puffy and doubled in size. If you poke your finger on the dough, it should spring back slowly and not all the way. At this point, you could stick in the oven, but I like to score the middle because it looks nice. Up to you though. Regardless, stick in the oven for 22 to 25 minutes or until golden brown like this. I'm not gonna lie, this is a great looking sandwich loaf. You don't even need to make Cubanos as well. One of them looks a little wider than the other because I'm not really that good at shaping yet since this is my first time. Place it on a wire rack though and let it cool down before you prepare your Cubanos later. Here I am at my friend's kitchen as we all got together to watch some League World Finals. Preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. To make Cubanos, cut off the ends and then cut it in half. Look how squishy this bread is. Now we want to cut it sideways so we can place all of our ingredients for our Cubanos. We'll first squirt some yellow mustard on both sides. Make sure to spread it obviously. Place some Swiss cheese on both sides. Layer on some ham on one. And our pulled pork on the other. We're now going to warm our meats and melt the cheese in the oven for I would say 5 minutes. Since I made the pulled pork the day before, it's cold and you want that melty gooey cheese as well, don't you? Once you take the pork out and it's nice and warm, put some pickles on one side. Assemble the sandwich, and then I like to mayo the outside a bit so when I press it down it has a nice crust. You can always just use butter or, even better, some lard. Proceed to heat up a pan, and once it's nice and hot, stick your sandwich on it. Then use something heavy, I have my friend's cast iron pan here, and press it down. And this is our makeshift panini press basically. Once you're done, place it on the side, and then let it rest a little bit, and when it's cooled down just a bit, you can slice into it. And here's the magic cross section. I wish I had a better shot, but it still tasted great, and I made better ones. This is probably one of my worser ones that I made in the beginning. I was starving, so I finally got to take a bite, and oh, this was mad good. So if you get a chance to make this, give it a shot, and let me know what you think. Hey everyone, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe and follow my Instagram at Weekend Cooks. Thanks for the support everyone. Hope you all like this one.